how do you measure the success of a university in research? And what it turns out is it depends on who you ask. So if you ask an academic, it's publications, citations, competitive research income, rankings. If you ask a business person, it might be patents, spin-outs, industry funding, advancement in TRL of things you're working on, or actually implementation of technological innovation or revenue from that intellectual property. If you ask a politician, it could be influence on policy or workforce quality, or it could be societal impact of some other sort. All of these measures are valid to each of these people. And the performance targets you develop are really quite dependent on which of these things sit in your highest priorities. And this was a question that the Australian government was asking itself in 2021. So they did a consultation in 2021 around research commercialization. And the background to that consultation was that when you looked at Australia's research performance at the time, we were solidly in the top 10. We're a great research jurisdiction in terms of our universities' rankings, in terms of our citations, in terms of our academic output. But when you start to look at research translation and commercialization, what turned out was that we were in the mid-teens to the mid-30s, depending on which of those measures you used. And more importantly, I think more importantly to us was that we were, when you compared us to the countries we would normally compare ourselves to, like the US, like the UK, like Canada, we were well behind those countries in research translation and commercialization. As a measure to combat that, the government announced in late 2021 a new program called the Trailblazer program. And in their press release, they said the focus of that program was on transforming research into ideas, products, and new businesses. And some of the things that they wanted to improve that they listed in that press release were to foster stronger links with industry partners, to come up with innovative IP arrangements, to come up with better promotion pathways for academics who are focused on commercialization, to convert research into commercial opportunities, and to increase the mobility between universities and business. And so they announced this program. Long story short, one of the 6 Trailblazers announced was the Resource Technology and Critical Minerals Trailblazer, which got going really in mid-2023 once the dust settled. That was led by Curtin University with strong participation from UQ and also James Cook University. And that program had about $50 million of government funding, about $50 million of funding from the universities, and about $100 million of commitment from the university partners. And when you look at the focus of that program that we put forward in the proposal that was successful, it was really focused on transformations in 3 different areas. One was transforming our people to be more commercially aware in their research programs and outputs, and that was called university transformation. And then another one was increasing our capability to work with our industry partners, and that was called the Tech Readiness Program. So it was really us working with them on their stuff. And then the other one was trying to come up with ways to bring forward our ideas and turn them into commercial impact, and that was called the Commercialization Program. And of course, all this was music to the ears of the Sustainable Minerals Institute because, at that point we'd been using that sort of approach for the last, for over 20 years, but more on that later. So in mid-2023, I had a list of about 16 different commercialization ideas at the SMI and a need to rank and assess those ideas and look at their stage and their potential and that sort of thing. And I knew this person named Leigh from her background in industry and other connections, so I invited her for a coffee. Leigh, over to you.
And here I am as industry advisor on the Trailblazer program. So wonderful to be having this opportunity to chat about our journey over the last couple of years, Rick. I think what motivated me around the program when we first met and had a chat around this opportunity was that coming from industry, I was really aware that the challenges we face have a genuine need for step change solutions. We've had a long journey of trying to continually optimize and improve. But when we talk about some of these bigger challenges, we need new ideas. And the reality is the research often already exists with the kernel of those ideas or those technology opportunities. But there is a need to really create a partnering development pathway to take those through to application. So one of the things I've found myself often talking about is particularly in the resources sector focus that we are for our Trailblazer, rather than there being this, somewhat messy middle, as it's often called, in taking innovation through to implementation, we really have a missing middle. And we're talking about the D in R&D, the development phase, to go from early stage research through to full commercial application. So my role has really been as a facilitator in trying to bring the conversations together between the researchers involved in these new ideas and the industry representatives that could help with that journey to take it through to application. And I think that it's been a real evolution as we've seen ourselves go from your initial list of 16 specific ideas through to what does this mean from a broader ecosystem evolution between the parties.
And, when you think about our original priorities with this university transformation, well, we were trying to work out what that meant. And the TRL projects, the Advancing Tech Readiness, we sort of felt like we knew what to do. And commercialization was really where we felt we were kind of falling short. We have within UQ 2 separate avenues for realization of commercialization opportunities. We have a commercialization company, UniQuest, that's been very successful. If you have a fully formed idea, particularly a technology or something that can be turned into a product, then UniQuest was well set up to take fully formed ideas and turn them into a spin-out company or a licensing opportunity or something like that. And if you have a fully formed idea or a technology that could be a service or software or something like that, then JK Tech, the SMI's tech transfer company, was really well set up to deal with that. The problem we had, and the problem we were addressing with those 16 different ideas was that most of our ideas weren't actually fully formed. And there's this gap between when a researcher, got to that kind of TRL 3-ish level and said, well, my work is done here, and getting to that 6, 7 level where you were actually at a stage that you could start considering how you might commercially implement those things, and also I think what came out of it was that we had a lot of gaps about our understanding of what those different levels were and what the various different ingredients were that would allow us to bridge that gap, as you mentioned already.
Yeah.
And this is where you came in again.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, my role was really like a business coach. As you mentioned, we developed the pipeline, but with it, we developed a commercial assessment framework so that we can really break up and look at where were some of these ideas already mature and where did we have gaps we needed to fill. And as we found was quite common that we were very comfortable with understanding how the technology could be applied and even having a reasonably good idea of the market that would utilise it. Where there was less definition was often around what might be the business model for how that would be engaged and who would actually take it forward and execute on that. Because again, a lot of skill sets required there in taking this out to industry that sit outside the academic realm. So how we went about the initial part of the program then was we really chose a selection of projects to be able to demonstrate this on. So we had a mix of physical technology, software, we looked at some service offerings and even some training and development opportunities. And we said, okay, these each need different needs. For some, it might be that they needed a business plan to be developed. For others, we needed to be more articulate around the resources required to take them forward. In some, they were really heavy on capital requirements, particularly physical tech development. Others were more around the need to have demonstration of industry application or just generally testing that there was a market pull beyond the initial conversations with industry. So what I was able to do was work with each of these teams around understanding what might that look like? Where did we need to engage some additional support? We did do some consulting support on some parts to help build some of those support pieces. And then once they were at a more formed idea, as you were saying, and a more formed plan, we could then hand them back over to the tech transfer office to be able to take it forward to that next step. But as you've touched on early on, one of the key parts in the success of this is around working with our industry partners. So can you talk a bit more around the role and the importance of that in forming these opportunities?
Sure. Well, the first thing to say, of course, is that as I mentioned already, the SMI, but also I would say our partners in other parts of engineering, architecture, and IT, who are also doing industry-facing research, were really quite comfortable working in that environment. So our model was really, and continues to be, to develop deep, long-term partnerships with industry partners and other stakeholders, government, other organizations. And the way we do that is by communicating sort of directly and deeply with them to try to develop a real understanding of their challenges, and then looking for the areas where their challenges kind of intersect with our capabilities, interests, and the sort of impacts that we're targeting. And when we do that, then we come up with a project. And an example of the sort of partnership that we have is that with our big longer term partnerships, those are 10-year plus partnerships that might involve 10 to 20 projects a year across a whole range of our different capability areas. So our understanding and approach to industry partnerships was really, really quite mature. And of course, this was core to the program, because when we started the Trailblazer, of course, we had these, this $100 million target for industry support. What Chris Moran, who was leading Curtin's initiative to put this together, called love letters from industry partners, letters of commitment. And UQ share that was about $24 million of industry funding for these research projects that were deeply collaborative with industry across 12 different partners. Within a year or so, $17 million of those commitments had faded away for various different reasons, around companies changing in priorities, with smaller companies, some of them not having the funds anymore. But in the meantime, what we did was, ultimately we ended up, despite losing that $17 million of funding, we brought in $34 million worth of funding. So overall, we've greatly exceeded our target, put together more than 20 projects with strong tech readiness level progression. And we worked with everything from majors to small, medium enterprises to a range of different companies who've never worked with a university before. So I think because of the fact that the team that was working in this area was pretty comfortable in this milieu, that the industry funding, the industry collaboration part of this program was worked out pretty well.
And I think what that really touches on is that it's less about focusing on specific opportunities that we necessarily choose at the university, and more around finding those intersections between the two parties.
Yeah, but that kind of left university transformation.
Well, it ended up being a bit of both, didn't it?
Yeah.
So I think building on that, this initial focus on commercialisation opportunities, we built a innovation masterclass that was around saying, okay, you've got an idea that matches what's we think is an industry problem. Let's take it to the industry partner, explain the opportunity. We talked about things, we upskilled people in things like strategic marketing. How do you identify the right target market? How do you demonstrate the value proposition? And ultimately, trying to cross this missing middle that I was talking about before. But as you point out, and the example of the Trailblazer as a whole, it's really around the broader conversation of bringing industry and academia together and seeing what actually evolves out of that combined interaction. And so what we have moved towards, by demand of our own people, was a new series of masterclasses around industry engagement, which are much more focused on project management skills. So how do we actually work together with the industry partners on defining scopes of work, actually checking in and seeing where there's the next development from that. And as you said before, with some of the long-term examples from SMI, this may be a series of small projects that grow into big projects over time, rather having the final end game in mind with the initial project. And I feel like that's where we've had the biggest shift in the evolution from the University Transformation Program around understanding that the broader capability building is what will unlock the later stage commercialisation opportunities. And along the pathway, as we have demonstrated, there's this huge opportunity for industry-funded research that develops those opportunities on the way. I think so. We've been able to really pivot from being more focused on specific opportunities to really now talking about creating this ecosystem where people can work together and identify the best need and the greatest value between the two.
I thought it was really interesting too that because this second masterclass you were talking about brought in industry representatives to actually hear them say, can you do this? Come and do this course for us as well. It's like not so much how does the university work with industry, but also how does industry work with the university?
Absolutely, I have had repeat requests for that, and so industry transformation is equally valid. I think in this story around how and when are we best to engage with research organisations, and how do we best scope those pieces of work. And I look forward to continuing that side of the role as well, which we've really tried to utilise our time to do as much as we can in going forward. So I think then, now that we've been through this, it's really been 2.5 years since we started on this process, and we have seen quite a shift in where we've focused, but I think each of the steps along the journey have contributed to the future sustainability of the program. What's your thoughts around how we're setting this up to be business as usual beyond the Trailblazer program itself?
Yeah, it's an important question because the Trailblazer program itself is not going to continue. It may continue in some other form, but when you look at the tangible things that have come out of it, on the commercialization front, we now have quite a robust pipeline of 15 or more different opportunities that are sitting on a much better defined and clearer pathway of requirements and tasks in order to reach commercial impact across, spin-outs, licensing, and internal sort of service opportunities. And we've also, got some runs on the board in that we've got a number of companies, including your own Banksia Minerals Processing, that's kind of reached escape velocity from the university, and also multi-million dollars of revenue from the services that have been developed as part of and delivered by JK Tech, that have been developed as part of this program as well. Now, when you look at the overlap with the original list that we talked about in 2023, well, 13 out of the 16 that we talked about have, I don't want to say they've sunk without a trace, but they haven't advanced. So 3 have gone on, and we've developed a number of other ones that have kind of come to the fore and advanced. But we now have a much clearer indication of where we are and what we need to do in order to get those things to commercial impact. And then when you look at some of the other measures that you might take for, how well things have gone on university transformation, when you think about clear bits of evidence you can point to, it would be not difficult at all to point to clear evidence that there's a much stronger now acknowledgement of the importance of and the significance of industry-funded research within the university. And there's also tangible evidence that people are getting promoted on the strength of their industry-engaged research and their commercialization processes. So the university is transforming, and there's also, I think, even at the broader university level, there's a stronger acknowledgement that government and industry-funded research is very important. Now, Could I put my hand on my heart and say that the university considers $1 of industry funding to be equivalent to $1 of ARC or an HMRC funding? The answer is no. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that, because $1 of competitive grant funding, what we call Cat 1 funding, it implies a specific acknowledgement of quality and relevance from your peers in other universities. And so I think it's unrealistic to expect otherwise. But what we've done so far, I think, has shown a way forward. It's shown that we can build these large industry-funded consortia addressing key challenges like critical minerals and resource technology innovation. It's shown that we can bring in significant industry investment if we make our programs relevant enough, and that if we make early seed investments in these sorts of programs, they can lead to programs that are financially good sense from the university's point of view, and that we can actually do this without sitting around waiting for another Trailblazer type program to come up.
And what you're talking about at the end of the day is culture change, and culture change takes a lot longer than a 4-year program, as we know. So I completely agree. We see some fantastic green shoots of change supporting things like the promotion opportunities, the academic progress, and really the acknowledgement that if we think around, looking at universities remaining relevant into the future, this is an important part of it. It's not only a pathway to demonstrate impact, but it's also a sustainable source of funding that goes beyond our traditional government grants and student fees. I think for me, the key takeaway that we've demonstrated, have learned and want to continue to build is the importance of these translator roles. And that is on both sides, both within the university and within the industry partners. We've seen great examples of both. And as you say, in the masterclasses now, we actually bring in examples of both to talk about their experiences. And I think as long as we can continue to foster and support those as part of business as usual, then we'll have similar conversations, we'll continue to build that support, and we'll continue to identify new opportunities.
Great. Well, thanks, Leigh. It's been great to talk about this. It's great to have a chance to talk about some of the really exciting outcomes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.